Please, Daddy, make her my mum." The desperate plea of a 6-year-old girl echoed through the cold glass-walled boardroom of Croft Enterprises. Billionaire CEO Evelyn Croft, infamous for destroying entire careers, with a single glare froze completely. What happened next defied every rumor about the ruthless Ice Queen. Evelyn Croft didn't do weekends, nor did she do sympathy. At 32, she was the sole proprietor and chief executive officer of Croft Innovations, a multi-billion-dollar real estate and tech conglomerate that dominated the Manhattan skyline. The financial press called her the Widowmaker of Wall Street, after she engineered a hostile takeover of Roth & Sons, subsequently dissolving their century-old pension fund to maximize shareholder returns. She was a woman carved from Carrara marble, flawless, cold, and entirely impenetrable. Her daily uniform consisted of bespoke Tom Ford suits, sharp enough to draw blood, and a demeanor that left seasoned executives stammering in her wake. But behind the towering glass facades and the 8-figure bank accounts, Evelyn was fighting a quiet, desperate war. Her uncle Harrison Croft held a formidable minority stake in the company. Backed by a faction of conservative board members, Harrison was actively building a case to invoke a dormant morality and stability clause within the original family trust. His argument was simple and devastating. Evelyn was a PR nightmare. She was perceived as a robotic, heartless entity, alienating public investors right before the highly anticipated initial public offering of their new biomedical division. Harrison's legal team, led by the aggressive attorney Gregory Finstock, was preparing to present Evelyn to a judge as unfit to lead, citing her isolated, erratic personal life and lack of family values as a liability to the Croft legacy. Across the city, in a cramped, drafty apartment in Queens, Nathaniel Hayes was fighting a very different kind of war. Nathaniel was a brilliant 34-year-old landscape architect, but his talent was currently buried beneath a mountain of crushing debt. 3 years ago, his wife Sarah had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. Nathaniel had liquidated his savings, remortgaged their small home, and maxed out every credit card to pay for experimental out-of-network treatments at Mount Sinai Hospital. Despite the relentless fight, Sarah had passed away, leaving Nathaniel alone with their daughter Colette and nearly $2 million in medical and legal debt. To make matters worse, Sarah's wealthy estranged parents were currently petitioning the New York family court for full custody of Colette, arguing that Nathaniel's financial ruin and grueling work hours made him an unfit parent. His entire life hinged on a single thread, an independent contracting gig as the lead designer for Evelyn Croft's flagship project, the Horizon Complex, a massive urban renewal initiative in Brooklyn. If he delivered the project, the massive payout would clear his bankruptcy proceedings and secure his daughter's future. If he failed, he would lose his livelihood, his apartment, and ultimately Colette. It was a rainy Saturday morning when the fragile house of cards Nathaniel had built finally threatened to collapse. His regular babysitter, Mrs. Higgins, called at 6 a.m, weeping frantically about a family emergency in New Jersey. She couldn't watch Colette. Nathaniel's phone immediately buzzed with a text from his project manager at Croft Innovations. Evelyn wants a full review of the Brooklyn botanical layouts at 9 a.m. sharp. Do not be late. Panic clawed at his throat. He couldn't afford a last-minute nanny service, and skipping a meeting with Evelyn Croft was corporate suicide. With no other options, he packed up his blueprints, shoved a juice box and an iPad into his weathered leather satchel, and bundled his 6-year-old daughter into her yellow raincoat. "Listen to me very carefully, Bug," Nathaniel said, kneeling to look Colette in the eyes as they rode the elevator up to the penthouse offices of Croft Innovations. Colette blinked back at him, her large hazel eyes the exact replica of her late mother's, wide with curiosity. Daddy's boss is a very serious lady. She holds our whole future in her hands right now. I need you to sit in the empty cubicle outside the boardroom, play your games with the sound off, and not make a single peep. Can you do that for me?" "I promise, Daddy," Colette whispered, clutching her stuffed rabbit Barnaby. When Nathaniel pushed open the heavy oak doors of the boardroom, Evelyn was already there. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, dressed in a stark white blazer and charcoal trousers, an untouched espresso resting on the mahogany table. She didn't turn around when he entered. "You're 3 minutes late, Mr. Hayes," Evelyn said, her voice a chilling, melodic monotone. "I apologize, Miss Croft. The subway lines were delayed due to the storm," Nathaniel replied quickly, unfurling his massive architectural blueprints across the table. Evelyn finally turned, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. She walked slowly toward the table, her stilettos clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor. For the next hour, she systematically dismantled months of Nathaniel's work. She criticized the water flow of the terraced gardens, questioned the structural integrity of the glass pavilions, and mocked the budget allocations. "This is uninspired pedestrian garbage," Evelyn snapped, tossing a red pen onto the blueprints. "I hired you because I was told you had vision haze. This looks like a municipal park in a bankrupt suburb. If this is the best you can do, I will terminate your contract today and find someone who actually understands the assignment." Nathaniel's heart hammered against his ribs. "Ms. Croft, please. The structural limitations of the bedrock in that sector forced a compromise on the water features. I can revise it. I just need another week." "You don't have a week," she interrupted, slamming her hands on the table. "I have a board of directors breathing down my neck, waiting for me to fail. I don't pay you for excuses. I pay you for perfection." Outside the boardroom, the battery on Colette's iPad flickered and died. The sudden silence in her little corner of the world made the harsh, raised voices from the boardroom sound even louder. She slipped out of the leather chair, clutching Barnaby to her chest, and padded softly toward the slightly ajar oak doors. She peeked inside her eyes, landing on the terrifying woman in the white suit who was yelling at her father. Nathaniel felt the crushing weight of despair settling over him. He looked at the blueprints, then at Evelyn's unyielding face. "Ms. Croft, I am begging you. If you terminate this contract, I lose everything. I'm in the middle of a custody battle. My daughter. Your personal life is of no concern to me, Mr. Hayes." Evelyn cut him off, her voice devoid of even a trace of empathy. "This is a business. If you cannot deliver, you are useless to me. Pack up your things." The words hung in the air, a death sentence to Nathaniel's family. He reached for his papers, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and absolute terror. He was going to lose Colette. The realization crashed over him, stealing the breath from his lungs. "Excuse me." A tiny, high-pitched voice echoed through the massive room. Evelyn and Nathaniel both froze. Standing in the doorway, her yellow raincoat dripping slightly onto the plush corporate carpet, was Colette. She looked incredibly small against the backdrop of the imposing corporate architecture. "Colette, no!" Nathaniel gasped, rushing forward, terrified of what Evelyn might do. He knew the CEO's reputation. She had fired executives for breathing too loudly in her presence. Bringing a child into her sanctum was an unforgivable offense. But Colette didn't run to her father. Instead, she marched straight past him, marching directly up to Evelyn Croft. The billionaire looked down at the 6-year-old girl, her expression freezing into a mask of pure shock. For a fleeting second, Nathaniel thought he saw a flash of raw, unfiltered agony cross Evelyn's face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Colette looked up at the intimidating CEO. She had heard her dad crying late at night. She had heard him on the phone, saying that his boss, Miss Croft, had all the money in the world and could make all their problems go away. In Colette's innocent, childish logic, the solution was terrifyingly simple. Colette reached out her small, sticky hand, grabbing the immaculate fabric of Evelyn's designer trousers. She looked over her shoulder at her horrified father and then back up at the billionaire. "Please, Daddy, make her my mum." Colette begged her voice, trembling but determined. "If she's my mum, she won't fire you. And we won't have to live in the car, and Grandpa won't take me away. Please." Silence violently descended upon the boardroom. It was a thick, suffocating quiet, broken only by the sound of rain lashing against the glass windows. Nathaniel stood, paralyzed, his blood running cold. He prepared for the explosion. He prepared for security to be called for a lawsuit for the absolute destruction of his life. Evelyn Croft stared down at the little girl holding onto her leg. The woman who routinely dismantled corporations and crushed competitors didn't shout. She didn't call for the guards. Instead, she began to tremble. Slowly, mechanically, as if her body were operating on a different frequency, Evelyn sank to her knees, bringing herself eye level with the 6-year-old. Up close, Nathaniel saw something impossible. Evelyn Croft's eyes were welling with tears. Her manicured hand slowly reached out, hovering inches from Colette's cheek, before gently tucking a stray lock of brown hair behind the little girl's ear. Evelyn's breath hitched a ragged, painful sound that seemed torn from the deepest part of her chest. What is your name?" Evelyn whispered, her voice cracking, stripped of all its usual authority. "Colette," the little girl answered bravely. Evelyn closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and tracking down her perfectly powdered cheek. What Nathaniel didn't know, what the world didn't know, was that 7 years ago, before she became the widowmaker, Evelyn had been secretly married. She had given birth to a daughter, a little girl with bright hazel eyes and brown hair who had died tragically of a congenital heart defect at just 3 years old. Her husband had blamed her obsession with work, taken a massive settlement, and left. Evelyn had buried her grief beneath layers of ice and ambition, transforming her trauma into a weapon to conquer the corporate world. But looking at Colette was like looking at a ghost. It was a devastating, beautiful collision of past and present. Evelyn abruptly stood up, turning her back to them as she walked toward the window. She crossed her arms tightly, taking several deep, shuddering breaths to compose herself. When she finally turned around, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by a terrifying, sharp calculation. But the tears still lingered in her eyes. "Mr. Hayes," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a low, serious register. "Send your daughter outside for a moment. Give her your phone. We need to speak privately." Nathaniel, utterly bewildered, ushered Colette back out to the reception desk, handing her his phone before closing the heavy doors. He turned to face his boss, expecting the worst. "Miss Croft, I am so deeply sorry. I couldn't get a sitter and she didn't mean any disrespect." "Stop talking," Evelyn commanded, though the harshness had left her tone. She walked back to the mahogany table and leaned against it. She stared at Nathaniel, really looking at him for the first time. She saw the dark circles under his eyes, the frayed cuffs of his shirt, the desperate posture of a man backed into a corner. "You are $2 million in medical debt from your late wife's cancer treatments," Evelyn stated, not asking a question, but stating a fact. "Your father-in-law is petitioning for custody because you are teetering on bankruptcy. Is this correct?" Nathaniel flinched. "How do you know that?" "I have my head of security thoroughly vet everyone who contracts for me," Evelyn replied coldly. "I know everything about you, Nathaniel. I know you are drowning." Then you know why I need this job, he pleaded. Please. Evelyn held up a hand. I am in a precarious position. She began carefully pacing the length of the room. My Uncle Harrison is attempting a boardroom coup. He has convinced half the shareholders that I am unhinged, heartless, and unfit to guide the company through the upcoming biomedical IPO. His entire argument rests on my lack of a personal life, my supposed inability to understand human connection or family values. He's pushing for a morality vote next Friday. She stopped pacing and locked eyes with him. I need to prove him wrong. I need an impenetrable shield against his character assassination. I need a family. Instantly. Nathaniel blinked his mind, struggling to process the sudden pivot in the conversation. I don't understand what that has to do with my botanical layouts. It has nothing to do with your layouts, Mr. Hayes, Evelyn said, stepping closer. Your daughter just gave me the most strategically sound business proposition I've heard all year. She reached into her briefcase, pulled out a blank legal pad, and uncapped her pen. Here is my counteroffer, Nathaniel. We get married. Tomorrow, a private, quiet courthouse ceremony. You and Colette will move into my Upper East Side penthouse. To the press, the board, and my uncle, we will present a united, wholesome, deeply in love family unit. I will adopt the role of the devoted stepmother. Nathaniel's jaw dropped. Are you insane? You can't be serious. I am a billionaire, Mr. Hayes. I am always serious, she countered fiercely. In exchange for your cooperation, I will wire $2.5 million to your creditors by Monday morning, wiping out your debt entirely. I will hire the best family law attorneys in Manhattan, specifically Gregory Finstock's rivals, to legally obliterate your father-in-law's custody petition. And I will fund your independent architectural firm with a $10 million grant, making you a partner at Croft Innovations. Nathaniel felt the room spinning. He grabbed the back of a leather chair to steady himself. You want to buy us. You want to rent a husband and a child to save your CEO title. I am offering you a lifeline. Evelyn said, her voice softening just a fraction as she glanced toward the door where Colette was waiting. This is a strictly professional arrangement, a 2-year contract. Once my position is secured and the IPO launches, we quietly divorce. You walk away with your daughter, your career, and financial freedom for the rest of your life. And I keep my empire. She slid the legal pad across the table. It was completely blank, save for her elegant signature at the bottom. I don't do sympathy, Nathaniel, but I do business, Evelyn said softly, her eyes betraying a profound hidden sorrow. Make a choice. Walk out that door and lose your daughter to your in-laws, or sign the paper and let me be her mother. Pen hovering over the dotted line, Arthur Stewart knew he was entirely compromising his independence, but a single glance at his daughter made the price utterly irrelevant. He signed the blank legal pad, legally binding himself to Evelyn Montgomery, the billionaire titan of Montgomery Innovations. True to her word, within 48 hours, an army of crisis managers from Edelman Public Relations had spun a masterful bulletproof narrative for the global press. The story was aggressively fed to Forbes, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal. The notoriously guarded, untouchable CEO had secretly been in a devoted long-term relationship with her lead landscape architect, culminating in a sudden, fiercely private marriage. By Monday morning, a synchronized wire transfer, initiated through J.P. Morgan Chase, had systematically eradicated Arthur's crushing medical debt. His late wife's astronomical hospital bills, the predatory private loans, the maxed-out credit cards, all wiped to absolute zero. Arthur and Colette were immediately relocated from their drafty, water-damaged Queens apartment to Evelyn's sprawling $50 million penthouse overlooking Central Park. It was a veritable fortress of glass and steel filled with original Picassos, imported Italian marble, and stark, unyielding modern furniture that looked more like an art gallery than a home. Living with the widowmaker of Wall Street was a study in extreme corporate paradoxes. During the day, Evelyn remained an absolute terror. She aggressively orchestrated the impending biomedical initial public offering, with Morgan Stanley ruthlessly crushing her Uncle Robert's attempts to dethrone her at every quarterly meeting. She paraded Arthur at high society galas, charity auctions, and hostile shareholder dinners, presenting him as the grounding creative force that perfectly balanced her aggressive corporate instincts. They played their designated roles flawlessly. Arthur wore bespoke Brioni suits, purchased with her limitless black card, smiling warmly for the paparazzi cameras, while Evelyn's hand rested possessively yet rigidly on his arm. But behind closed penthouse doors, the rigid lines of their multi-million-dollar business arrangement began to blur entirely because of a 6-year-old girl. Evelyn had commanded an entire wing of the penthouse to be rapidly remodeled, for Colette hiring top-tier interior decorators from Restoration Hardware to create a breathtaking fairy tale sanctuary, complete with a painted starry ceiling and a towering bookshelf. Yet, despite providing every material comfort, Evelyn kept her physical distance. She was terrified of the dormant, agonizing maternal grief clawing at her chest, terrified that loving another child would break the fragile ice holding her together. Colette, however, refused to abide by the emotional terms of the corporate contract. One rainy Tuesday evening, after a grueling 14-hour negotiation with a hostile pharmaceutical board, Evelyn sat slumped in her private mahogany study, nursing a generous pour of Macallan 25. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Colette padded in wearing oversized pajamas and dragging her worn stuffed rabbit Barnaby across the Persian rug. "You missed dinner again," Colette stated simply, her large hazel eyes staring up at the formidable billionaire without a shred of fear. "I was working, Colette. I have a global launch in 3 days. Go back to your father." Evelyn replied, her voice tight, desperately trying to maintain her impenetrable emotional armor. Instead of retreating, the little girl climbed directly onto the velvet sofa next to Evelyn, placing the stuffed rabbit gently on the CEO's lap. "Daddy says you work too hard because you're trying to protect everybody at your company, but who protects you when you get sad?" The innocent, profound question hit Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. She stared at the child, the ghost of her own lost daughter, overlapping violently with the vibrant, breathing reality of Colette. Slowly, Evelyn set her crystal tumbler down on the coaster. Her manicured, trembling hand reached out, pulling the little girl into a hesitant, desperate embrace. Colette immediately buried her face in Evelyn's silk designer blouse, her small arms wrapping tightly around the billionaire's neck. Standing silently in the doorway, Arthur watched the most feared woman in Manhattan bury her face in his daughter's hair, her shoulders shaking with years of repressed silent weeping. From that pivotal night onward, the entire dynamic of the penthouse shifted irrevocably. Evelyn began aggressively altering her draconian schedule. She demanded her terrified executive assistants block out her calendar every afternoon at 4 o'clock so she could sit on the floor and have tea with Colette. She started reviewing Arthur's Brooklyn architectural designs, not as a tyrannical boss searching for flaws, but as a genuine collaborative partner. Their late-night corporate strategy sessions slowly morphed into hours of quiet laughter, shared bottles of vintage Bordeaux, and deep conversations about their pasts. Arthur found himself entirely captivated, not by the untouchable billionaire CEO, but by the fiercely protective, deeply wounded woman hiding beneath the ruthless designer armor. He used his architectural brilliance to solve a massive geological issue in Evelyn's flagship project, designing a geothermal bedrock anchoring system that saved the company millions, proving to the board that he was a genius in his own right, not just a trophy husband. Robert Montgomery, however, was not a man who accepted corporate defeat gracefully. Realizing his hostile boardroom coup was rapidly disintegrating due to Evelyn's sudden, pristine family image and Arthur's brilliant contributions, he maliciously changed tactics. Robert secretly allied himself with Arthur's wealthy estranged in-laws, the Vanderbilts of Connecticut. Robert covertly funded their aggressive million-dollar custody lawsuit against Arthur, aiming to legally strip Colette away and publicly expose Evelyn's new family as a fraudulent PR stunt. The ultimate showdown occurred in a highly secure private arbitration room in downtown Manhattan. The Vanderbilts had hired a ruthless legal hit squad from Skadden Arps, Slate Mega, and Flom. Their lead attorney, a man known for destroying families, sneered across the polished table, presenting a heavily doctored psychological evaluation that painted Arthur as an unstable, bankrupt gold digger who had practically sold his child to a sociopathic corporate raider. Your Honor, this marriage is an absolute sham, a desperate attempt to save a CEO title. The opposing lawyer declared, loudly sliding a thick, damning dossier toward the presiding judge. Evelyn Montgomery is a documented workaholic with zero maternal instincts. She engineered the destruction of the Roth pension fund without batting an eye. She is psychologically incapable of providing a nurturing, stable environment for a vulnerable child. We are respectfully requesting immediate full custody be granted to the biological grandparents. Arthur felt the air violently leave his lungs. Panic seized his chest. He reached for Evelyn's hand under the heavy table, terrified that despite all her wealth, the law would tear his daughter away. Evelyn's grip was like forged iron, instantly anchoring him. Evelyn stood up slowly, meticulously smoothing the front of her pristine white blazer. The arbitration room's temperature seemingly dropped 10 degrees. She did not look at the intimidated judge. Instead, she locked her piercing, icy blue eyes directly on Arthur's arrogant former father-in-law. I anticipated this pathetic, transparent maneuver the moment my uncle began whispering in your ear. Evelyn said, her voice a deadly calm weapon that echoed in the silent room. She snapped her fingers without breaking eye contact, and her lead corporate attorney immediately handed her a sleek black leather folder. She tossed it onto the center of the table with a resounding, violent smack. 2 weeks ago, anticipating your interference, I hired Kroll, the world's premier corporate intelligence and risk consulting firm, to conduct a hostile shadow audit of your family's global holding company. Evelyn stated, watching with dark satisfaction as the blood instantly drained from the grandfather's face. What my investigators found was absolutely fascinating. You operate 3 illegal shell companies in the Cayman Islands, systematically laundering untaxed real estate dividends to avoid federal scrutiny. It constitutes massive coordinated tax evasion and federal wire fraud. I have already drafted a comprehensive report and forwarded these findings to my highest contacts at the Securities and Exchange Commission, locked under a 24-hour embargo. The opposing legal team erupted into absolute chaos, attorneys shouting objections and scrambling for their phones, but Evelyn's voice sliced through the panicked noise like a surgical scalpel. "Sit down and shut your mouths," she roared, the full terrifying force of the Widowmaker finally unleashed. She slammed both hands onto the mahogany table, leaning forward like a predator ready for the kill. "You arrogant fools think you can use my corporate reputation against me. Let me clarify something for you. I am a monster to my competitors because the market requires me to be. But if you ever threaten my family again, if you ever try to take my daughter from me, I will not just bankrupt your holding company. I will personally ensure every single one of you spends the rest of your natural lives rotting in a federal penitentiary. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the trembling grandparents, delivering her final undeniable ultimatum. You will withdraw your custody petition this exact second. You will sign a permanent, irrevocable relinquishment of all legal rights to Colette. Or the SEC gets the unredacted, decrypted files tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, and the FBI raids your Connecticut estate by noon. Decide right now. Complete stunned silence filled the arbitration room, heavy and suffocating. The judge slowly lowered his glasses, clearly intimidated by the sheer, unbridled power Evelyn commanded. Within 5 agonizing minutes, the Vanderbilt legal team capitulated. The papers were hastily signed with shaking hands. The threat to their family was permanently, ruthlessly eliminated. As they walked out of the towering courthouse and stepped into the secure privacy of Evelyn's waiting Maybach, the adrenaline finally crashed. Arthur pulled Evelyn fiercely into his arms. It wasn't a calculated move for the paparazzi cameras. It wasn't a strategic play for the board of directors. He kissed her a deep, desperate, overwhelming kiss that tasted of rain, profound relief, and undeniable passion, pouring all his unspoken love into the gesture. Evelyn melted against his chest, her protective walls finally permanently collapsing into dust. You called her your daughter in there, Arthur murmured against her lips, his hands tangled in her soft hair, his heart hammering against hers. Because she is, Evelyn whispered, fiercely, looking up into his eyes. The protective corporate ice was completely gone, replaced by a blazing, unconditional fire. And you are my husband. The 2-year contract is entirely void, Arthur. I am never letting either of you go. A year later, the biomedical IPO launched to record-breaking global success, permanently cementing Evelyn's legendary status on Wall Street. But her greatest, most profound triumph wasn't found on the screaming trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. It was found every single afternoon at exactly 4 o'clock, sitting on the soft rug of a penthouse playroom building, towering architectural block cities, with the brilliant man who had captured her heart and the brave little girl who had finally brought her back to life. Thank you so much for experiencing this intense journey of corporate betrayal, fierce protection, and unexpected love. If you were captivated by Evelyn's ruthless takedown to protect her new family and the heartwarming bond she formed with Colette, please hit that like button. Share this story with fellow romance and drama lovers, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling, high-stakes storytelling. Let me know your favorite twist in the comments below.